What's the Story of Our History takes a road trip to Kota Belud. You have me, Chris Pereira, Shari Jeffrey, Avtar Singh, and Chris Higgs from Canada, and a guest from Kota Belud. And we're going to talk about the rise of Raja Muda Hashim of Marudu. And we're doing it at Shari's family home, all the way here in Kota Belud. This is What's the Story of Our History.
Hi, very good evening, everybody. We are in Kota Belud, lovely Kota Belud, in Shari Jeffrey's family home in Kampung Labuan or Pelabuhan. And Shari, Chris Higgs, who's come all the way from KL, and Chris's expertise are in Sarawak history, which intersects into Brunei history, which intersects into Sabah history, North Borneo history, and Encik Roslan, who is from Sabah, and he has a very, very strong knowledge and background on the history of the Bajau and many, many of the historical events that have happened on the west coast, Marudu, and east coast of Sabah as well. So, Shari, where do we start tonight?
So we need to talk about why Raja Muda Hashim and why the fall of Marudu.
Maybe you can give an introduction who Raja Muda Hashim is first.
Okay, well, Raja Muda Hashim, uh, also known as the son of Sultan Khanzul Alam in Brunei. Not many people will actually talk about Raja Muda Hashim, but this is the topic of which very interesting. Why suddenly Raja Muda Hashim appear in Kota Marudu? And why? Because of his rise, um, Kota Marudu fall, of which by then was under uh, so this Sharif
Sharif.
Osman.
Yeah.
But again, it's always interesting. Now we got a guest here, which is Chris. Chris actually the one who actually talk about this matter. But let Chris talk about why he's here now in Kota Belud and Kota Marudu. We visited Sharif Osman fort today, and we actually look up at the area. We visit the makam, and I think I pass it over to Chris first before I come in later on. Yeah, Chris.
Okay, well, thank you. The a lot of people like to associate the attack on Sharif Osman with James Brooke. He's definitely a main character. He's involved, but he's not necessarily the only character involved, which is why I wanted to suggest that we name this after Raja Muda Hashim, who is the one who's actually in the middle between two different families. Uh, he's famous for hosting James Brooke when he first arrived to Sarawak, and James Brooke helped him win the rebellion and then made a deal with him to rule Sarawak. Most people have heard that he was made Raja of Sarawak. Comes from people taking wording from 100 years later and trying to backdate it to 1841. But when he took over Sarawak in 1841, he only took over the government, and Sarawak was a vassal underneath Brunei. So James's whole strategy was to make Sarawak stronger. He needed to make Brunei stronger, and his view of making Brunei stronger was actually making Raja Muda Hashim stronger. So there's a very famous picture which you may have seen. It's called Signing of the Treaty, and it dates to October 1844. This sets up the whole story about the conflict, not between Sharif Osman, but between Raja Muda Hashim and his political rival Pangeran Yusof.
Okay, banyak orang mungkin tidak tahu siapa Raja Muda Hashim dan siapa Pangeran Yusof. Dan apa kaitan Pangeran Yusof, Raja Muda Hashim dengan Kota Marudu. Jadi bagi saya, kita patut jelaskan kepada orang ramai bahawa Kota Marudu bukan saja berkisar mengenai Sharif Osman daripada tahun 1830 hingga 1845. Kita pun perlu tahu apa yang berlaku sebelum 1830 dan apa yang berlaku selepas 1845. persoalan yang paling penting di sini adalah kenapa Marudu kena serang pada tahun 1845 dan apa kaitan Raja Muda Hashim dan tiba-tiba berada di Kota Marudu bersama Brooke dan tentera laut armada British. Inilah kita ada panel hari ini di mana Chris akan bercerita melalui perspektif antarabangsa. Kita ada Encik Avtar yang akan berkongsi cerita mengenai pandangan-pandangan beliau kaitan Jazz Bro, Raja Muda Hashim. Dan kita ada Encik Roslan yang akan mempertengahkan perspektif tempatan. Nah, cuba Encik Roslan cerita sikit perspektif tempatan pasal apa yang Encik Roslan tahu pasal Syarif Osman, Kota Marudu.
Okey, terima kasih Tuan Shari ya.
Ya.
Uh, Raja Muda Hashim satu figura yang berasal dari Brunei. Tapi Raja Muda Hashim juga sebenarnya dari segi perspektif tempatan, dia mempunyai peranan tersendiri dalam konteks sejarah negeri Sabah. Mungkin orang Sabah melihat Raja Muda Hashim sebagai satu figura yang cenderung lebih kepada Brunei. Tapi sebenarnya di Sabah, kalau kita bertanya dengan orang-orang tempatan, Kota Belud ke Kota Marudu ke ada sepanjang pesisiran pantai, mendakwa mereka mempunyai hubungan dari segi keturunan dengan bukan saja dengan Raja Muda Hashim, tapi dengan pembesar-pembesar daripada Brunei itu sendiri. Jadi kita mau merungkai sejarah serangan Marudu dan Raja Muda Hashim dalam konteks lokal. Apakah signifikannya, apakah pandangan orang-orang Sabah mengenai dengan peristiwa itu sendiri. Jadi tadi saya berkesempatan menyertai sahabat kita ini ke kubu ke kubu Shari Osman sendiri dan melihat bahawa nilai sejarah itu sebenarnya perlu diketengahkan ya, untuk supaya orang Sabah dapat memahami tentang sejarah serangan Marudu, serangan kubu Shari Osman tersebut. Jadi mungkin podcast pada hari ini sekarang ini merungkai sedikit sebanyak mengenai dengan perkara itulah.
Ya, jadi itu pandangan Encik Roslan kenapa peristiwa sejarah Kota Marudu itu penting di dalam sejarah Sabah. Sebenarnya kita tidak mau mengatakan kita berpihak kepada Brunei atau kita berpihak kepada Kota Marudu, tetapi kita perlu menjelaskan bahawa sebelum kehadiran Syarif Osman di Kota Marudu, wujud satu pentadbiran kerajaan Brunei seawal abad ke-16 di mana Sungai Tulin pertama yang diserahkan kepada kerabat Kesultanan Brunei merupakan Kota Marudu. Kita tidak juga boleh nafikan memang ada unsur-unsur di mana ada kedatangan beberapa keluarga besar, contohnya daripada Mengindanau, bertapak di Marudu, dan ada kuasa besar daripada Sulu bertapak di Kota Marudu, tetapi pada sekitar tahun 1830-an satu nama besar wujud di Kota Marudu. Nama dia merupakan Syarif Osman. Dan saya cuba menarik perhatian Tuan Chris. Apa pandangan pihak Barat terhadap kenapa the British Armada attack Syarif Osman in Kota Marudu? Why they attack Syarif Osman in Kota Marudu?
Well, it's a series of series of events which link together. Brooke himself wanted full control of Sarawak without the interference of Raja Muda Hashim. And to do that, he needed to get Raja Muda Hashim back into the Bruneian court. His proper place in Bruneian court, in Brooke's eyes, was as the Bendahara, the prime minister. The problem is, someone's already occupying that position, Pangeran Yusof. So, using Royal Navy ship, the HMS Samarang, Frank Marriott, who's a midshipman on this ship, has a very excellent explanation of what actually happened, and it's the prime definition of gunboat diplomacy. So Brooke describes the situation as the situation was tense. So we didn't know what Pangeran Yusuf would do, so we made sure to have guns available. So what Frank Marriott describes is being in a boat in front of the audience hall. He's the one who drew the picture that you probably see, and he was in a boat that had a cannon pretty much aimed at the audience hall. So if anything happened, then they could respond, but obviously it would be seen as a threat as well. So what happens is the Sultan does agree to let Raja Muda Hashim become Bendahara again, which kind of deposes Pangeran Yusuf.
Yes.
Simultaneously, Raja Muda Hashim pretty much announces new policy changes in Brunei. These are all policies which are in favor of British policies. What I thought was really interesting that Shari has dug up is that Raja Muda Hashim was not charmed to British ways by James Brooke. He actually was already inclined that way. Can you tell us about
Yes,
the early?
ya. Sebenarnya ini cerita mengenai Marudu ni kita kena gabung beberapa perspektif. Perspektif apa yang berlaku di Brunei dan apa yang berlaku antara Brunei dengan Sarawak dengan James Brooke. Apa yang saya mau terangkan di sini macam begini ya. Pada ketika itu di zaman 1845 ni ada berlaku pelbagai konflik. Contohnya siapakah identiti Pangeran Yusuf itu? Pangeran Yusuf sebenarnya anak kepada Sultan Muhammad Tajuddin. Di atas mereka merupakan Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin. Dia mempunyai dua orang anak, satu Sultan Muhammad Tajuddin dan satu orang merupakan Sultan Muhammad Kanzul Alam, dan Pangeran Yusuf ni merupakan anak kepada Pangeran Muhammad Tajuddin. Di sini ada berlaku sedikit salah faham di mana Pangeran Yusuf dengan berurus niaga dengan Salim Osman, mereka lebih berminat untuk melakukan urus niaga dengan Dutch atau Belanda. Padahal pada di sebelah pihak lagi, kita ada Raja Muda Hashim merupakan anak kepada Sultan Kanzul Alam. Mereka pada awalnya sudah menulis surat kepada William Farquhar, merupakan William Farquhar ni ada dua Farquhar, tapi Farquhar yang kita sebutkan di sini adalah Farquhar yang dikenali sebagai Raja Melaka, dan mereka ada membuat hubungan dari segi surat menyurat antara William Farquhar dengan Sultan Kanzul Alam, di mana mereka cuba menggalakkan perniagaan antara Brunei dengan kerajaan Britain lah, atau daripada kerajaan British. Di sini berlaku salah faham lah, sebab dua keluarga ni masing-masing ada kandidat lah siapa yang akan menjadi sultan. Sama ada Pangeran Yusuf berminat menjadi sultan, Raja Muda Hashim pun berminat menjadi sultan, tetapi siapakah sultan yang sebenarnya lah, dan apa kaitannya dengan Kota Marudu. Jadi kalau ikut dalam pecahan salasila Kesultanan Brunei, orang yang layak menjadi sultan seterusnya adalah daripada jalur Sultan Muhammad Tajuddin, di mana kita ada Sultan Jamalul Alam dan Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin kedua dan seterusnya kepada Sultan Hashim Akbar. Ini jalur yang sebenarnya telah tersedia ada mengikut sistem Bataras Kesultanan Brunei. Dan apa pula kaitan Brunei dengan Kota Marudu? Banyak catatan sejarah yang kami perlu betulkan hari ini mengatakan bahawa Kota Marudu tu ada sultan, ada raja, tapi mereka tidak pernah kaitkan Kota Marudu dengan pentadbiran Kesultanan Brunei, sebab siapapun yang memerintah di Sabah pada ketika itu perlu ada unsur kerjasama dengan Kesultanan Brunei. Dan siapakah identiti Syarif Osman sebenarnya? Adakah dia itu ada kaitan dengan Brunei atau dia ada kaitan dengan Sulu? Tetapi bagi kami yang penjejak sejarah, kami rasakan bahawa beliau, Raja Muda, diletak di Kota Marudu oleh keluarga Sultan Muhammad Kanzul Alam sebab Raja Muda Hashim mengambil kesempatan pada tahun 1845 memujuk James Brooke untuk membantu dia menyingkirkan Sharif Osman di Kota Marudu. Betul kan, Encik Roslan?
Yes.
Coba terangkan Encik Roslan macam mana?
Ini politik, geopolitik pada masa itulah. Maksudnya Sharif Osman dia pro dengan yang kita sebut tadi, kerana ada kepentingan perniagaan, mungkin ada kepentingan lain, mungkin kekuasaan. Maka dia cenderung untuk menyokong salah satu pinggiran tersebut. Bermakna Sharif Osman dia sebenarnya bukan against the Bruneian, but he want to play his part, he want to play his role, so that his power, his influence stays at Marudu.
Adakah Sharif Osman itu seorang London? Sebab banyak orang kata dia London.
Well, that's the interpretation of the colonials, orang-orang Eropah lah. Dalam konteks mungkin orang tempatan, mereka memperjuangkan, sebab yang datang menyerang itu orang luar, orang Eropah. Dan pada masa dan ketika itu 1845, 150 tahun yang lebih kurang, pengaruh kolonial sudah ada di Nusantara, termasuk di Borneo Utara. Jadi sentimen orang-orang tempatan itu sudah melihat bahwa mereka orang luar datang untuk menyerang kita. So they have no choice, they have to protect whatever the intention of Sharif Osman is. Tapi dalam hal untuk mempertahankan mungkin tempat mereka.
Saya mau terangkan sedikit tentang sistem pentadbiran Brunei yang berasaskan Sungai Kuripan, Sungai Kerajaan dan Sungai Tulin. Benda ni tidak jarang dicerita oleh orang-orang ramai kerana mereka terus melihat contohnya Sharif Osman sebagai pembesar, tapi tanpa melibatkan hubung kait dengan sistem pentadbiran Brunei. Contohnya wujudnya Raja Ismail di Tempasuk, tiba-tiba dia menjadi raja tanpa melibatkan hubung kaitan sistem pentadbiran Brunei. Sistem pentadbiran Brunei berasaskan kepada 3 sistem, bermakna Sungai Tulin. Sungai Tulin itu merupakan beberapa kawasan yang diberikan kepada kerabat Kesultanan Brunei. Biasanya mereka dalam kategori wazir. Mereka ni diberi kawasan dan pengiraan-pengiraan ini akan melantik pembesar-pembesar untuk menjaga kawasan mereka, mentadbir kawasan itu bagi pihak. Dan mereka akan mentadbir, memungut cukai dan menyerahkan hasil cukai itu kepada pengiraan sebagai punca pendapatan. Ini sebagai Sungai Tulin. Dan Sungai Tulin ini akan turun balik kepada anak keturunan lah, boleh diwarisi. Sistem pentadbiran kedua merupakan sistem kena panggil Sungai Kuripan. Sungai Kuripan ini merupakan wilayah-wilayah di mana Sultan merasakan bahawa menteri-menteri beliau ada berjasa dan dihadiahkan kawasan sepanjang hayat mereka lah. Dan bila perkara ini berlaku, mereka akan melantik pentadbir atau mereka sendiri mentadbir kawasan tersebut dan mereka akan membuat beberapa perkara. Contohnya mereka ada kuasa hidup dan mati penduduk kawasan itu. Kedua, mereka boleh mengadakan tentera dan seterusnya mereka juga boleh buat perdagangan supaya kawasan itu maju. Perkara-perkara ini perlu dijelaskan secara jelas sebab ada elemen-elemen cuba menutup kisah Sungai Tulin, Sungai Kerajaan, Sungai Kuripan daripada peradaban sejarah Borneo Utara. Seterusnya adalah yang paling penting Sungai Kerajaan. Sungai Kerajaan ni merupakan wilayah-wilayah di mana kawasan itu merupakan kawasan milik Sultan yang mentadbir ketika itu, di mana Sultan boleh melantik pembesar-pembesar tertentu untuk mentadbir dan mengut hasil daripada kawasan-kawasan itu. Balik kepada Kota Marudu dan kaitannya dengan Raja Muda Hashim. Kalau kami baca ikut catatan sejarah daripada Brunei, Kota Marudu merupakan kuripan Raja Muda Hashim, dan Raja Muda Hashim ada rasa tidak berpuas hati bahawa Sharif Osman sudah sampai ketika di mana beliau cuba membebaskan diri beliau daripada naungan Brunei, sehingga beliau mau menjadi seorang penguasa bebas. Penguasa bebas ni berarti dia mau declare independen sendiri dan dia berkemungkinan mau menjadi raja dan sultan. Tetapi ia menimbulkan satu sentimen di Brunei di mana Kesultanan Brunei, terutamanya keluarga Sultan Kanzul Alam dan Raja Muda Hashim, merasa tidak berpuas hati dan memerlu bantuan kuasa barat, terutamanya dari bantuan James Brooke, untuk meminta bantuan untuk menyingkirkan pengaruh kuasa Sharif Osman yang berada di Kota Marudu, macam begitu. Jadi kita boleh tanya pendapat Encik Avtar sama ada kenyataan-kenyataan ini benar dan apa yang boleh ditambah daripada kenyataan yang kita baru jelaskan sebentar tadi.
It's a very controversial topic, even in Sabah today, I would say. There's two perspectives and two narratives. Who is Sharif Osman? There's no doubt he is a descendant of the Sharif. There's no doubt about that, I think. And I think everybody agrees on that aspect of history as far as who the man is. But what is clear, and it tends to get forgotten about, is this fact that he is sent there as an administrator. And he does a very good job. Marudu is a very successful trading outpost for guns, gunpowder, and many other jungle products as well, and sea products as well. Marudu is incredibly profitable for the family of Raja Muda Hashim in terms of revenue and taxes collected. But at some point in time, and we're not so sure why, he decides, Sharif Osman decides that he wants to go and be independent, and he does not want to fall under any rule, and he is no longer owing any oath of loyalty to Raja Muda Hashim or the family. And so this is possibly why we have this clash. He intermarries with a rival sultan, and this may have also upset the Bruneians as well. It's a possibility. And so there's also the other controversy of the British Royal Navy getting involved in this engagement, where they are sent up there with the primary mission of destroying the forts that have been established, possibly established during Brunei rule. And they may have pre-existed Sharif Osman being appointed there as an administrator, or he may have built it himself. But the controversy at the end of it is whether or not he really was who the British have recorded him to be, and how Brooke sort of views Sharif Osman to be a pirate or a Lannon and so forth, a recalcitrant. So there's a couple of narratives to it. Was it just somebody who just didn't want to be ruled anymore, and that he wanted to be his own master, his own Raja, or his own Sultan? Brooke gets into a little bit of trouble much later. There is inquiries into the use of Royal Navy ships in some of his activities. But again, we need to keep an open mind as to who he really was. Was he an administrator? Was he someone that decided to then self-appoint himself as Raja, possibly Sultan, and in the end paid the ultimate price when they not only destroyed his forts, but also possibly killed him during the engagement as well?
So at the north end of the empire, Bruneian Empire, you have Sharif Osman kind of trying to break away independently. And on the south end of the empire, you have James Brooke either trying to break away or at least trying to manipulate Brunei itself. So he's acting quite independently as well. So you've got two outside forces kind of creating problems in the middle.
Yeah.
And it seems, the way Shari describes it, it seems like the whole system is highly divided, and everybody owning a different section. there are many different owners, and they never quite act as one cohesive unit. And they have all these temporary alliances to get to become more powerful, and then once they have a strong power, they can get their way.
Yeah, actually, it started from the 17th century, where you can see the decline of the Brunei Empire. They're no longer known as the empire as what they was once known. They are actually struggle with internal problems. This is where their vassals, those administrators that appointed, those family member that rules on their behalf, try to look at other powerful warlords. And some of these warlords could be Sultan from Sulu or Maguindanao. But let me terangkan, biar saya jelaskan.
But James Brooke is probably the ultimate warlord.
Yeah, I will have to agree to that because you see, James Brooks coming from outside, he got a better, clearer picture. He don't want to associate with all these small warlord. He tried to form a government. It's a Victorian type of government that he wanted to establish. Whereas he also having some challenges himself. He have to actually attack all those forces of which goes against his rules. All these problem is not just happen in Sarawak, it's also happen in Sabah as well. Whereas in the east coast of North Borneo, the Sultan of Sulu actually try to claim not just east coast of Sabah, they try to claim as far as west coast. But as we explained from long time ago, from the very beginning of this podcast, they are actually the descendant of the Sultan of Brunei. So when in the central Brunei administration having some issues problem, the rules become rules of all these uh, territory become fall into anarchy. Anarchy in the sense that the strongest rule the weakest. So this is what actually happened in Kota Marudu. I would have agreed to Chris on James. James, when he came to Sarawak, he have a very clear view. He saw that anarchy was so rampant, might as well just take over everything. But he have to also solve certain problem that he faced in Sarawak.
But he saw Raja Muda Hashim as the vehicle of reform.
Eh,
Someone who was willing to rule in a British manner. So when we're talking about the the return of Raja Muda Hashim into the court, this is the same time they want to sign a treaty of amity and friendship and promising to suppress pirates.
Can I just, before we talk about Raja Muda Hashim coming back to the court, I think he was sent out of the court in the first place, correct? On purpose. They sort of pushed him out a little bit and sent him down to Sarawak in the beginning, right? And what was the reason for that?
I think Shari can answer this.
Yeah, because they want to appoint Pangeran Yusuf, which is the son of Sultan Muhammad Tajuddin.
So this is
as the
before, right? This is
yeah,
before.
as the Bendahara. But again, when he was sent to Sarawak to become the governor of Sarawak or Kuching at that point of time, he realized he lost his title, Bendahara title. Actually, Bendahara, you cannot lose your Bendahara title just to assume governor post. That is a demotion, you see. So he need to come back and assume his title as Bendara if he wishes to become a Sultan of Brunei. So Raja Muda Hashim actually aspired to become the next Sultan of Brunei. But again, what a lot of people did not realize is there are internal dispute. Who will be the next Sultan of Brunei and who's the rightful next Sultan of Brunei? This is where Sharif Osman, Pangeran Yusuf, Brooke, and Raja Muda Hashim entangled to the northeast of the Borneo not
Territories.
territories lah. And the most interesting part, because of this incident, uh, one of the most important individuals in North Borneo who are actually quite strong enough to actually become the next Sultan or Raja of Borneo, which is the uh, uh, Sharif Osman, was actually attacked and destroyed, and they did not just destroy his fort, actually he destroyed his actually entire influence in the north part of North Borneo.
Encik Roslan, boleh saya tanya, macam mana Sharif Osman boleh ada pangkalan besar begitu di Marudu dan siapa tentera dia di sana? Dan tentera dia, their oath of loyalty is to Brunei or to Sharif Osman?
Okey, sebenarnya sejarah Sabah secara umumnya masih banyak yang perlu dikaji, diselongkar. Sebab bila kita mengatakan ingin membebaskan dirinya daripada Brunei, it means dia tidak, macam mana dia ada keyakinan begitu kalau tidak ada sokongan daripada orang-orang the locals.
Ya.
Sebab saya tengok kalau sebelum peristiwa serangan Kota Marudu, sebelum itu pun ada tokoh-tokoh dari Brunei datang ke sini diterima dengan baik oleh orang-orang Sabah. Contohnya Raja Tua Mengkabung. Dia datang 17, tapi dia dapat sokongan daripada orang-orang tempatan, bajau, dusun, then they intermarriage. So itulah budaya, mungkin cara berfikir orang-orang Sabah ni, mereka akan menerima ketua selagi mana ketua itu mungkin menjaga mereka dengan baik. So that's why this one figure in Marudu, Sharif Osman muncul. Kita tidak tahu macam mana pemerintahan pada masa dan ketika itu, tapi bagaimana orang-orang tempatan menyokong dia. Tapi dia tidak dapat melangsungkan kuasanya, pengaruhnya, kerana ada serangan daripada British lah.
Ya.
Di sini saya mau tambah sikit lah. Bila Encik Roslan mengata orang tempatan menyokong, orang tempatan yang menyokong beliau sebenarnya lebih kepada orang-orang yang suku orang laut lah. Saya rasa macam Iranun, Pelingit, Bajau. Tetapi saya rasa orang-orang macam beberapa pihak orang suku Rungus macam begitu, mereka tidak sebenarnya 100% menyokong Sharif Osman, tetapi ada beberapa suku dusun yang lain yang menyokong Sharif Osman lah. Tapi saya rasa apa yang diutarakan oleh Encik Roslan adalah betul, di mana pada ketika itu sistem pentadbiran dia sebagai seorang pedagang, di mana beliau berjaya memajukan Kota Marudu sehingga mempunyai jumlah penduduk sebanyak 50,000 orang, dan dia menguasai lebih daripada 14 wilayah di dalam Kota Marudu itu sendiri. Saya perlu menjelaskan di sini, di zaman itu Sabah ni dibagi kepada beberapa zon, nama-nama lama yang digunakan. Sempadan Kota Marudu adalah daripada Pendasan ke Labuk, dan ada satu kerajaan selepas Marudu yang dinamakan sebagai Magindora, dan satu zon lagi pentadbiran yang dikatakan sebagai kawasan Tirun sehingga Sibuku. Ini nama zon-zon pentadbiran lama lah. Jadi Sharif Osman berjaya meluaskan pengaruh dan kekuasaan dia sehingga Magindora ke Tirun, dan beliau juga ingin meluaskan kuasanya sehingga ke Kota Belud, Tempasuk, sehingga ke Mengkabung. Tetapi pada ketika itu Brunei di zaman pemerintahan Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin pertama, saya sudah sedar perlunya ada pengukuhan kuasa balik di Brunei, di mana beliau mempunyai 2 orang anak yang berkaliber, Sultan Muhammad Tajuddin dan Sultan Kazal Alam, di mana mereka perlu mengambil balik mana-mana kawasan yang hilang telah cuba diambil oleh pembesar-pembesar tempatan. Apa yang berlaku pada ketika itu, anak-anak beliau terpaksa berfikir, manakah kuasa-kuasa besar Eropah yang boleh digunakan untuk membantu mereka menguasai balik kawasan-kawasan mereka yang hilang. Walaupun ada tuntutan daripada Sulu, Brunei tetap mengatakan bahawa Sabah itu merupakan kawasan jajahan mereka. Cuma di sebelah Sarawak berlaku suatu perkara yang menarik di mana James Brooke mula mengembangkan kuasa beliau dan mengambil beberapa buah wilayah baru sehingga ke Limbang. I think this is your area of expertise of Brooke expansion of territory.
Yeah, I would say even before Brooke was trying to expand his territory, he was trying to convert his territory into an English colony. And part of this process was,
When Brooke is successful to convert that area into British territory, there are concerns from the Foreign Office, correct or not, and the Colonial Office,
yeah,
and how to rule North Borneo at that time.
yeah, they always had questions over whether Brooke actually had an independent country with Sarawak or whether he's a vassal.
He's not, but he doesn't become governor in 1841.
1841, he becomes the governor. Yes,
He does become governor.
Well, the
Governor
named
under
Brunei.
Brunei, not
Yeah.
not independently. Yeah.
Not
So that one is a
independent.
misconception, isn't it?
It's a common misconception,
Yeah.
which I found this great quote. What is it? I do not rule Sarawak under. I rule Sarawak under the crown of Borneo. I do not wish to support an independent monarchy, for it's convenient to use Brunei as a shield, a convenient shield. And what he's talking about here is that he's actually referring to the English-Dutch Treaty of 1824. In theory, no new colonies are allowed to be formed in this territory without pre-approval of the people in the natives. So the Bruneians actually would have had to have asked them to come form a colony. The fact that Brooke kind of jumped in and then asked to become a colony creates a little legal problem. So they did a little dance around this. This is when they come up with Plan B, which is a little bit like Pelabuhan. The Pelabuhan of Labuan. Plan B. So since the Labuan itself is currently not occupied, and the Bruneians have technically kind of asked them if they want it in 43. In 44, it's kind of a little bit more officially offered, but still with terms to be decided. Because of this offer, Britain itself actually decided to send someone to investigate both Sarawak and Labuan and also Balambangan as a potential place to put a naval base. So this is where things get really confusing, because Brooke had nothing to do with the government officially.
Mm-hmm.
He was part of the EIC as a soldier, and he did form a relationship with the Royal Navy because he liked to volunteer with the Royal Navy, and they were just buddies basically. But what happened when they want to potentially negotiate for Labuan, the British government decided to officially make him a British agent. And this is when things get very confusing of where Brooke lies, whether he's private, whether he's government, we don't know.
Sini yang menarik. Bila kita berbicara pasal Kota Marudu, kita tidak boleh berbicara Kota Marudu, mengaitkan Kota Marudu dengan Maguindanao, dengan Sulu, tapi kita kena tengok
Dengan lebih luas.
pandangan yang lebih besar. Kita kena tengok apa yang berlaku di dalam Kesultanan Brunei itu sendiri, apa yang berlaku tentang pengaruh geopolitik terutamanya Spanyol, dan apa yang berlaku dengan Belanda dan ketika itu, dan apa yang berlaku kepada kerajaan British, apa yang berlaku di Labuan dan apa yang berlaku di Sarawak. So untuk menceritakan keadaan Kota Belud, kita tidak boleh bercerita pasal Sharif Osman dan Kota Belud. Apa yang saya boleh katakan, Sharif Osman merupakan seorang tokoh yang agung dan beliau telah disalah tafsirkan sebagai seorang landun, padahal beliau bukan seorang landun. Beliau merupakan seorang pedagang yang berjaya dan berjaya mentadbir Kota Marudu dengan cemerlang, tetapi beliau agak leka di mana ada hubungan dengan kuasa-kuasa lain seperti contohnya kuasa Kesultanan Brunei yang pada ketika itu cuba mendapatkan pengaruh daripada kuasa Britain pada ketika itu. Jadi bila kita bercerita pasal sejarah Kota Marudu, kita tidak boleh melihat Kota Marudu daripada kaca Kota Marudu dengan negara yang dekat dengan Kota Marudu. Walaupun macam contohnya anak beliau Syarif Yassin kahwin dengan keluarga Kesultanan Sulu, tetapi kita tidak boleh menafikan bahawa keberadaan Sharif Osman itu merupakan sebagai wakil daripada pentadbiran Kesultanan Brunei yang berada di Kota Marudu. Jadi di sinilah elemen-elemen sejarah ni kita boleh gabungkan dengan penjelasan daripada Mr. Chris, daripada Encik Avtar dan Encik Roslan. Kita boleh gabungkan bahawa wujud pelbagai peristiwa di utara dan ke selatan dan termasuk daripada kerajaan Britain itu sendiri untuk menyusun semula bentuk pentadbiran baru era pengaruh kuasa-kuasa barat.
So peperangan Marudu, Encik Roslan, apa yang berlaku?
Saya merasa betul kerana telah menyertai Tuan Chris tadi. Kami menyusuri sungai menuju ke kubu Sharif Osman itu sendiri. Dan sebelum saya menjawab itu, kami merasa terkilan kerana sejarah yang bernilai itu tidak dijaga dengan sebab, maksud dari segi infrastrukturnya, yang mana dia mempunyai satu peristiwa yang satu peperangan yang besar lah. Kalau mengikut Tuan Chris, dia only takes 1 hour, is it?
Yeah.
1 hour to attack. Itu pun setelah Sharif Osman diceritakan meletak benteng kayu balak 3 diikat dengan rantai supaya musuh tidak datang. Maksudnya musuh ni yang British itulah. Tapi kerana the might of the British, mereka bom bila pecah benteng tu, mereka masuk dan berlaku peperangan, maka jatuhlah Sharif Osman. Satu peristiwa yang menyedihkan. Ramai di kalangan orang Sharif Osman, kalau ikut istilah the Muslim, syahid, because they fought yang cuba menghancurkan negeri mereka.
Yeah.
So satu episod yang penting dalam sejarah negeri Sabah, bagaimana orang tempatan react when there is an outside force try to destroy their place. So it's time for the government to look into the history of Sabah. Kita ada, Tuan Shari, kita ada Akta Warisan Negeri Sabah 2017 ya. Cuma akta ada, saya melihat dari segi mungkin peruntukan perlu ditambah untuk kajian yang lebih dibuat untuk mengangkat kisah sejarah negeri Sabah, termasuklah perang Marudu itu. Saya mungkin tidak dapat menjawab sepenuhnya kerana perlu kajian. Bianca satu buku yang bagus untuk kita baca. Bagaimana perinciannya, bagaimana berlaku sebelum dan semasa peperangan itu. Dan I think Chris have done a good job to maybe to write the history of the Marudu War.
Many people are reappraising the history, because what you see in the history itself is a lot of, I would say, constructed reasoning. So the Raja Muda Hashim needed to be stronger in Brunei. Brooke also wanted him to be stronger in Brunei. So Brooke then approaches the Royal Navy to form basically a fleet to come to Marudu with overwhelming force. So how does the Royal Navy actually justify its actions? By basically the way the very British way they like to do things. They like to do things through a new word that's coming up called lawfare. They like to use treaties, use paper, use reasoning, and basically prepare themselves ready for court. So they want to do an action, they expect to get called out on it, but they prepare their evidence ahead of time. So this creates a whole situation where Raja Muda Hashim is using phrasing that the British use. I wish to suppress piracy. I wish to all this kind of stuff that is obviously James has just kind of written out a rough draft and they're just kind of here, sign it. So James takes these letters over to Singapore to Thomas John Cochrane, who is actually the admiralty of the fleet in this area. And he actually doesn't convince Cochrane right away to attack. It takes a little bit more. There's a couple other interesting things going on at exactly the same time. You mentioned the English, the Dutch, the Spanish. One thing you didn't mention was
Yes, the American.
America Sharikat. Yes. Believe it or not, they were actually quite interested in coming over at the same time. Coincidentally, the same time that that Brooke was trying to enlarge Sarawak itself, gain more resources, America was trying to do the same thing. They were running ships from the Atlantic coast to China, and they wanted to actually secure coaling stations. This is the time period where a lot of ships are shifting to coal, but you can't carry all the coal with you, so it's good to have a chain of coal stations where you can refill as you go. And so the Americans actually sent out a ship, basically the USS Constitution, called the Old Ironsides, which still exists, believe it or not. It's amazing that they kept it. But they sent it on a round the world voyage to basically create closer ties with China, but also to pick up coal leases where they can. So when this ship is in Singapore and Brooke knows that they're in Singapore, this is the same time that the British are coming to Labuan to check out the possibility of making it a naval base. Because the captain of the ship is actually sick, they actually spend quite a bit of time in Singapore, and this is all the time that they need to send a ship to send a ship straight to Sarawak, declare Brooke an agent, shift him to Brunei, make a coal deal, lock down the resources. Just 2 weeks before the U.S. ship actually comes in. So what happened was the Americans get there and they find out from the Raja Muda Hashim side is that they have given their coal rights to England. Now, this also violates the 1824 treaty because they're not allowed to make a trade monopoly.
Oh, yeah.
So Brooke right away says, "Oh, that was my old translator. He liked to drink." So he kind of gives the excuse right away to trying to downplay another clear violation of a treaty. The treaties were all important. They didn't want to risk having war and trouble again in all the different territories. Because the Europeans themselves were not most peaceful people either. They also had all internal battles. So they had solved a way to do it through paper and the treaties and maintaining the appearance of law and order, I guess we'd call it. So I call it the appearance because it's obviously constructed. So you can't enforce. One of the reasons why many modern historians will say Sharif Osman was not a pirate is because his only crime that has been proven is that he engaged in slave trading, but everybody engaged in slave trading. So prosecuting him and calling him a pirate for slave trading doesn't really make sense because slave trading was
Rampant.
region wide. It was still going on. So it's a bit, yeah, it's a bit juicy to say.
Bagi Kesultanan Brunei pula, mereka melihat Sharif Osman ini merupakan satu ancaman besar bagi mereka. Disebabkan Sharif Osman pada ketika itu mempunyai kekuatan tentera yang seimbang dengan Kesultanan Brunei. Bermakna Sharif Osman mempunyai kekuatan tentera yang boleh menyerang dan melawan Brunei pada ketika itu. Jadi Brunei juga tidak mahu kuasa-kuasa ini menjadi masalah kepada sistem pentadbiran Brunei. Maka banyak benda berlaku di belakang sekaligus di belakang dan ada beberapa tangan-tangan gelap yang kita tidak nampak memainkan peranan di mana akhirnya Pangeran Yusuf dijatuhkan hukuman mati di Kimanik dan Raja Muda Hashim akhirnya bersama 13 orang ahli keluarga terbunuh dan kuasa pentadbiran Kesultanan Brunei kembali kepada susul galur Sultan Muhammad Tajuddin. Avtar,
So in the end, there's violence. There's great violence within the royal household. Pangeran Yusuf is killed. Hashim is killed. Sharif is killed. And then you have this period of instability that begins all over again after a very short period of peace, it would seem. But what's obvious to everyone in Brunei at that particular period of time, when they send the Royal Navy up north to Marudu, is that Sharif Osman presents a clear and present danger to not only the Sultan of Brunei, but also to Raja Muda Hashim, who has suddenly lost his territory because his administrator is no longer cooperating with him. And that is what transpires. You have this battle that goes on in which Raja Muda Hashim is believed to have been killed in the first volley, the first fire that's made on the fort. And ultimately, within an hour, it's all over. And that's it.
Saya boleh tambah ya, sorry. Selepas Perang Marudu. Perang Marudu berlaku pada 1845. 55, 65, 75. 30 years. 1877 baru datang overback. Runding dengan Sultan Mumin untuk menyerahkan Sabah kepada catatan company lah. And goes on. So sekiranya we can always use the if word lah. Sekiranya okay. Siapa ni? Sharif Osman sudah meninggal dalam perang Marudu itu. Katakanlah kalau Muda Hashim masih hidup. Okay? Sebab Muda Hashim, ayahnya Kanzul Alam juga punya pengaruh di pantai barat ni kerana anak-anaknya berkahwin di Kota Belud ada di atas Kota Belud ni, Kota Marudu, Kudat. Raja Muda Hashim satu figur yang di sejarah Sarawak his name appear, dan di pantai barat Sabah dia juga mempunyai pengaruh. Kuat atau lemah tapi dia mempunyai pengaruh. Sekiranya Raja Muda Hashim masih hidup, I think he will good for the people in the East Coast lah. But just too bad dia telah dibunuh. And 30 years is a vacuum of power. Siapa yang kuat pada masa itu mungkin boleh berbuat sesuatu ke atas negeri Sabah. But after 30 years, lompang kuasa itu sehinggalah Sultan Abu Mumin menyerahkan kepada overback Sabah.
Di sini saya mau tambah sedikit, mencelah sedikit. Sebenarnya Raja Muda Hashim mempunyai seorang adik dia atau ahli kerabat dia berada di Pendasan. Banyak orang tidak tahu bahawa di Pendasan pada suatu ketika dulu ada seorang kerabat anak Sultan Kazul Alam yang bernama Pangeran Muhammad Tajuddin. Dan Pangeran Muhammad Tajuddin ini berkahwin dengan putri Iranun dan dia mempunyai beberapa orang anak. Salah satu orang anaknya bernama Pangeran si Raja Muda yang menjadi penguasa di kawasan Abai, Kota Belud. Jadi daripada sini kita boleh mengatakan bahawa Pendasan itu ditadbir oleh keluarga Kazul Alam, Sultan Kazul Alam, dan termasuk Abai dan Kota Marudu itu pada suatu ketika dulu merupakan kawasan pentadbiran Raja Muda Hashim. Itulah kenapa dengan kemunculan Brooke, Raja Muda Hashim meminta Brooke membantu menyelesaikan beberapa masalah yang wujud di Sabah selain daripada masalah yang wujud di Sarawak. Masalah yang diselesaikan oleh Brooke bukan saja Kota Marudu pada tahun 1845, tetapi serangan-serangan tapak-tapak suku Iranun yang berada di Tempasuk, di Abai, di Pendasan, dan termasuk serangan tentera Armada Britain di Tunku pada tahun 1851. Dengan serangan-serangan di situ bahawa mereka, apa yang berlaku adalah Kesultanan Brunei cuba menggunakan kuasa barat untuk mengambil balik tanah-tanah kawasan jajahan mereka. Dan benda-benda seperti begini perlu dirungkai, dikaji dan dikongsikan bahawa cerita sejarah ini adalah saing kait mengait dan kita tidak boleh menceritakan sejarah itu melalui perspektif Kota Marudu itu saja, tetapi kita kena pandang jauh lebih luas daripada itu.
We didn't get to Raja Muda Hashim's peak in power. We skipped a little bit ahead. The Marudu Bay, the attack on Sharif Osman, was actually part 2 of the attack.
Oh.
Part 1, which is why I brought up the slavery, is because Thomas Cochrane had been convinced to come to Brunei first. And in Brunei is when he gets a letter, interestingly phrased very Britishly, that Pangeran Yusuf apparently had 2 British subjects as slaves. So they might be stretching the term British because they were Indian natives from Bombay under the Bombay presidency. That's the first part. And the second part is that they had been recently freed by Brooke himself the month before, just so that they could create evidence that he had been keeping these 2 slaves. So they had been freed, brought to Singapore, wrote a deposition of how they were traded from Sharif Osman to Pangeran Yusuf, and then kept as slaves. So this way they implicate both, they tie Yusuf together with Osman, and has created kind of the foundation for why, basically calling them all pirates, slavers, and why British need to interfere. Because in 44, Raja Muda Hashim has promised to sign a treaty of friendship and suppression of piracy. So there's greater British interests at stake. Also, if you look at Cochrane himself, while he's deciding whether to actually listen to Brooke and to take this action, he obviously knows it's a bit shaky. But at the same time, he hears about the Americans coming in. He also hears about the French buying Basilan, the island of Basilan. This purchase never actually goes through because Spain objects, and then they decide to make it go away. But the point is, there's actually an admiral of the Navy starting to get into British interests overseas. And we get into the same situation where, does he act alone, or does he write back to England, get permission to act, wait another 2 months, and then it could be too late. You have Brooke running back and forth between Brunei, Sarawak, and Singapore, trying to convince Cochrane to come. He does manage to do it eventually. So this is when he goes to Brunei, demands Yusuf to pay reparations for the 2 slaves. He refuses. They fire. There's 2 versions of the story. One version, the British fire a warning shot over the top of his house. The second story says they shot into the roof of his house. So naturally, Yusop fires back. So this was enough cause. Again, they like to call it casus belli, the reason for war. So they blame Yusop firing in self-defense. How dare he? They blame him for opening fire on the British ship. So then they fire on him. It doesn't sound like anyone really got killed, but Yusop effectively flees from Brunei into the hills. So at this point, Cochrane goes on to step 2 of the mission, which is Sharif Osman. So they had a very clear plan of clearing both of the political rivals and potential ally out of the way for Raja Muda Hashim to rise. So Yusop has fled into the hills. The fleet goes into Marudu Bay. At the same time, Marudu Bay is actually fighting. The Pengan Yusop has gathered his followers and has invaded Brunei to attack Raja Muda Hashim. So his younger brother, half-brother, Badruddin, does manage to win this battle, and then Yusop officially packs up his belongings in prahus and escapes to Kemanes. So with a 1-2 punch that Cochrane applies, this is when Raja Muda Hashim is now left in Brunei with no enemies whatsoever. And he's actually recognized as Sultan Muda, meaning
The young prince.
Heir to the throne.
heir to the throne. That's why we get to the peak of Raja Muda Hashim's power.
Yeah.
But because Yusop attacked Brunei, the Sultan agrees that he should be executed. This is when Pengiran is executed sometime in October, maybe November
Year?
1845.
Okay.
And coincidentally, 1 month after that is when you have the blowback. So this is when you have Raja Muda Hashim's family at the top of their power, but then drama happens.
Can you elaborate? The drama happens. How does Raja Muda Hashim get killed?
Okay, this is the story, which it's a bit annoying to talk about simply because we don't know if it happened at the end of December 45 or the early January 46. So your historians are constantly giving both 45, 46 as the date, so it gets a bit confusing. So around New Year's is when the pro or the anti-British forces, the ones who are supporting the other families, basically. I'm sure you
Sultan
can
Muhammad
explain this
Tajuddin.
better. You know the family so much better than I do.
Yeah, a lot of people think that it's a dispute between Pangeran Yusuf and Raja Muda Hashim, but they forgot there is another power behind this Raja Muda Hashim and Pangeran Yusuf, of which the real the real Sultan in waiting lah. A lot of people doesn't understand that the way Brunei Sultanate atau pemerintahan Kesultanan Brunei mentadbir adalah mereka menggunakan sistem bertaras. Jadi sistem bertaras ni kuasa bukan 100% di tangan Sultan. Sultan mempunyai beberapa orang pentadbir atau advisor di belakang Sultan, dan mereka menampak bahawa orang yang layak untuk mentadbir menjadi Sultan sebenar kepada Brunei adalah tidak lain dan tidak bukan merupakan Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin kedua dan keturunan Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin kedua. Jadi apa yang berlaku di antara Pangeran Yusuf dan Raja Muda Hashim sebenarnya satu peristiwa yang saya namakan Games of Thrones, yang akhirnya berpihak kepada jalur Sultan Muhammad Tajuddin, merupakan anak kepada Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin yang pertama. Jadi apa yang berlaku akhirnya, konflik yang berlaku di dalam kalangan kerabat dapat diselesaikan dengan kemunculan Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin kedua dan disambung oleh Sultan Hashim Akamaddin. Jadi selesai konflik dalaman, dan daripada ketika itu maka Brunei berpendapat kami tak perlu wilayah besar di Borneo Utara, kami pun tidak perlu ada wilayah besar di Sarawak. Cukup sekadar kami ada wilayah Brunei di mana kami boleh mentadbir tanpa gangguan-gangguan daripada mana-mana kerabat Kesultanan Brunei. Jadi ada dua perkara berlaku daripada apa yang kita cerita pasal Kota Marudu, Raja Muda Hashim. Apa yang saya boleh buat kesimpulan. Pertama, wujudnya satu entiti kekuasaan Kesultanan Brunei yang baru di bawah jalur Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin kedua diteruskan oleh Sultan Hashim Akamaddin, walaupun Hashim Akamaddin tidak dilantik secara terus sebagai Sultan selepas Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin kedua, di mana Sultan Abdul Mumin dilantik sehingga pada tahun 1885, dan bila Sultan Abdul Mumin mangkat pada 1885, maka Sultan Hashim Akamaddin naik menjadi kesultanan, jadi Sultan Brunei, di mana dua elemen pengaruh Pengiran Yusuf dan Raja Muda Hashim telah dapat diatasi. Apa yang berlaku lagi di mana penguasaan James Brooke di Sarawak semakin kukuh, sehingga mereka boleh meluaskan pengaruh mereka sehingga hampir ke Brunei, termasuk kawasan Limbang. Satu proses lagi yang berlaku adalah di mana tertubuhnya kuasa American Trading Company pada tahun 1865 hingga 1875 di Elena, di Krimanis, dan seterusnya konsesi tersebut diambil alih oleh pasangan Overbeck dan Dan pada tahun 1878, sehingga tertubuhnya Chartered Company 1881. Saya rasa Chris adalah orang yang lebih mahir menjelaskan bahawa James Brooke actually also interested on North Borneo. Probably you can elaborate on that.
Well, the ultimate dream of James Brooke was to rule a very large, successful English colony. The fact that England would not convert Sarawak into a colony frustrated James. He looked way around that. He also looked around. One of his biggest concerns was the headhunting and piracy, because that affected trade and the willingness to invest. So that affected the success of the nation. Also, the size of the nation itself was also an issue. He wanted to constantly increase territory, like every good expansionist will want to do. And this is part of why James is so incredibly furious and disappointed in Brunei when Raja Muda Hashim and his family are executed in late 45, early 46. He doesn't even hear about it until about March, because this was during the time of the monsoon where it was hard to travel between. But as soon as word came to him, that's when he just went over the top ballistic in his writing. So if you want to see James Brooke at his worst, look up his reaction to this incident, and he will tell you exactly what he thinks of the Bruneians at this point. So his hopes were to form an alliance with Raja Muda Hashim, grow Brunei in strength, get Brunei to reform itself, and then eventually convert the whole thing into a British colony. So it would have included the entire Brunei Empire, basically, including he had dreams from Tanjung Datu all the way to Sulu even. So he had very grand dreams, but all of it was ruined by this assassination attempt. And he almost actually got partway there. After the Battle of Marudu, when Raja Muda Hashim is at its peak power, this is when James Brooke asked for a little favor in return. Most people know that Sarawak was leased annually from Brunei, so he had to pay money every year to Brunei. But this was the point where he says, "Hey, how about we work out a single lifetime fee for Sarawak, and not just Sarawak, but also the next door rivers as well." So Raja Muda Hashim had already agreed to this. James just hadn't signed the deal and hadn't paid the money. So simply by the time between September 1845 and March 46 greatly affected the whole dynamics of the relationship between Brunei and Sarawak, leading to the capture of Brunei. Again, Eve managed to convince Thomas Cochrane to come back. And what's interesting is they capture Brunei, and Thomas Cochrane and James Brunei are also talking in letters after the fact. And Thomas Cochrane admits to he saw the capture of Brunei as finishing what they had started in 1845. So he saw the two things as connected. They started the process of raising Raja Muda Hashim. That failed, and so they had to come back in to close to teach Brunei a lesson, basically. And this is the deal when after the Brunei is captured. That's when James officially pulls Sarawak out of Brunei. He stops paying any money at all for at least that section of Sarawak.
That's when he officially basically takes over Sarawak then.
Yeah.
Without Brunei.
Without payment, yeah. He claimed that the payment would now go to the 4 surviving members of Raja Muda Hashim's family. But you've talked about their territories and where they are.
For Raja Muda Hashim, he got 2 tulin in Sabah, which is Putatan and Sembulan. This is both tulin of Raja Muda Hashim. But he also have several koripan, which is Ambong, Tempasok, Abai, and Marudu.
What's a kuripat?
Kuripan, as I said the other day, was a territory, wilayah, of which was given to a minister. As a prime minister, he's also entitled to be government, not just tulin, he also entitled kuripan. Or if one day, if he become sultan, he can have all 3. He can have either kerajaan, tulin, and kuripan.
So did they manage to hold on to these territories after the great assassination?
No, that's the sad thing. Right after his assassination, the Koripan will fall back to the Sultan, and the Sultan will give away that territory to another wazir or another minister. But a lot of people doesn't look at from the perspective of the Rakyat Tulin. Rakyat Tulin mean the former follower or former supporter of Raja Muda Hashim. All these people actually turn back into become either fishermen or become farmer, just to avoid to be stuck into another round of court conflicts. So this is where these people, a lot of people don't realize that they supported rebellion, local rebellion against Brunei in Sabah. There are quite a number of famous rebellion against Brunei. For example, Padastamit rebellion, where the Morut actually rebels against Brunei. That was the first rebel, which is rebellion, which is somewhere around as early as 1880s. 1881. And then subsequent to that, there are numerous rebels against Brunei. The most famous one will be the attack of Pulau Gaya in 1897, whereas Brunei eventually surrender his whole West Coast territory to the Chartered Company. So, who was all these rebels? Well, I wish to explain that all these rebels are actually former follower of whichever uh, pangeran who actually been killed or murdered as a victim of what we call the Games of Thrones and or conflict of the Brunei Sultanate.
Okay. I want to come out with one point, some point, but before that, I want to ask Mr. Chris. Brooke managed to put Raja Muda Hashim at his peak of power.
Yeah.
And then he left Sarawak. Knowing that the situation is still fragile, why does Brooke does not some sort of protection to Raja Muda Hashim?
Brooke was counting on Britain to supply or at least visit Brunei with naval ships. He thought the offer of the treaty was enough that the Britain would already willingly send ships. So the only reason Brooke found out about the assassinations in March was because he had gotten a British ship to go visit Brunei. So when the British ship visited Brunei, it's when they found out. But obviously, 3 months too late. So it's Brooke himself he didn't have instant control of the Navy. He had to convince Thomas Cochrane to get something done. And the British themselves were not invincible. They only had a certain number of ships and a gigantic area of ocean because they were protecting everything from Singapore to Hong Kong to Australia to New Zealand. That was called the China Station. It was incredibly huge. So if yeah,
Carry on, carry on.
so if anything happened in New Zealand, you would get suddenly with 2 or 3 ships would go down to New Zealand, and you've got complete emptiness above.
Okay, my point is, the British, they have governed 2/3 of the world, the so-called Commonwealth now. They are, they know the politics of the countries that they invade, and they use conflict for them as a reason for them to interfere. See, so with the death of Raja Muda Hashim, Brooke came and he imposed his power. So it means that there is an element of from the British or from the Brooke to carry on the conflict, the internal conflict, for that so that she blown out, so that they came.
Yeah, I get the question. It's kind of a did they encourage crisis and conflicts? Because it's true. Every time there was a crisis conflict, they never let it go to waste. They come in, they gaudim everything. So every time a sultan dies, they literally try to just say, okay, no more sultans. Every time every time something happens, they try to change the paradigm. So if a crisis happens like piracy, the reason why they love to lock people into anti-piracy tactics was because it was just so rampant. And as soon as piracy happened, they said, "Oh, you can't control your territory. I'm here to help." So this kind of they invite themselves in through a legal method. And the whole reason for the legal method is to kind of appease the other European nations. They certainly had the firepower to come in and crush everybody, but they like to see themselves as superior.
This some social science professor, they call it decolonization of history. They want to, we should not be too European centric. There must be some local opinion on how to address, how to define the historical event happens in years back. So maybe, uh, we are talking from the beginning about the Marudu, the conflict in Brunei. We have to maybe being critical on this thing. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And it's not like James Brooke is always the center of the story. That's the problem. The Europeans always like to place themselves center stage. And in this case, it's not exactly center stage. He's a supporting player. He's the main driver, but the issues are still already there. It's just kind of I don't know. It's a complex interaction, and if you take the total colonial view, like you might all the books are written from their point of view, and history has this huge bias towards everything written, and the British wrote so much, it's very easy to just accept what they wrote as history. But that's the real problem, because things like we were just talking about, you have the Brooke version of who should inherit the throne, and then you have the local Bruneian version of who should inherit the throne. So which version is right? I would say the Bruneians probably had a better idea of what their system was like.
Yeah, I found an article dated 1819, of which they were saying that the situation in the Brunei Sultanate are actually ripe for the British to come in and actually to see what they can do in terms of uh, helping themselves into forming a government in Port North Borneo in Sabah and Sarawak at that point of time. They were saying that you only need to the extent of that article, all you have to do to actually acquire. You don't need to conquer North Borneo per se. All you have to do is just send one ship and visit Brunei, then you can actually acquire territory. That's what actually did. What happened when royalists visited Sarawak? Actually, he visited earlier on somewhere in Eastern Kalimantan, I think West Kalimantan. Then later on, he found an opportunity where they already had internal conflict between Pengiran Indra Makota and Pengiran Bendahara at that time. So that's what actually happened. But again, as I always mentioned from the very beginning, don't look at Marudu fall as a conflict internally because of Marudu, but you have to look at the very big picture. There are all sort of events going on, not just in Marudu itself, but within the family members of the Sultan and between James Brooke relation with Raja Muda Hashim within the family member of Raja Muda Hashim that already in North Borneo, and uh, there is also an element where Chris correctly mentioned about uh, the rise of Raja Muda Hashim uh, contribute towards the fall of Kota Marudu.
Just to add one bit to the point you made, Roslan, was so there are many different sources you can look at. First, you have the sources from people that were there at that time, what they observed firsthand. And so they wrote what they saw and from memory. And that's very helpful. It helps you to create a sort of a structure of what is going on at that particular time for that particular place and a particular event. But then the problem is somebody else reads the source and they write their version. So that becomes a book or a journal or an article from what they read. Now, again, it depends whether they've read one source or they've read many sources from that period of time. And that can determine how that book or that journal is going to come out, whether it tells you everything or it doesn't tell you everything. And then the problem just, if it is a problem, if it is not accurate, somebody else comes along, reads that, and repeats that again. And then somebody else reads that and repeats that other person. It just keeps repeating itself over and over again, and it can carry on over a period of 50 years, 100 years. But what you need, I think, is, especially today, we need our young adults and our academics, Malaysians, to tell their story. I was talking to Chris about this yesterday. Malaysians need to read the journals, read the sources, and to read it extensively, not just restrict themselves to just one, but extensively. And to do so with a very critical mind and an open mind. And this is where I think there is a bit of a problem. We don't tend to have an open mind. People tend to be a little bit closed when they do read and they do tell the story. But we really need to go with an open mind, because if you already have a preconceived idea or notion about somebody or something, you're never going to write something that is neutral. It will always end up being critical or biased, and that's very dangerous in history. It happens very often. And the other one thing I would just add before I finish what I'm saying: sources lie, people lie. I'll give you an example. The end of the Second World War, pada penghabisan Perang Dunia Kedua, kebanyakan general dan brigadier general Jerman yang ditangkap, when they were interviewed, they told one version of story. It's not our fault, it's our leader's fault. He was the one that made decisions, we just followed. Fine. And then they wrote books after that about their experiences of how great they were and all the wonderful things they did. But then if you go and read documented evidence of what transpired in the beginning, they were just as culpable. They were also as responsible as well. So people lie. Sources do lie sometimes. So, and that's not only Western, it's Eastern as well. But we have a lot of sources. It's just a matter of finding the sources and reading as much as you can and then forming an opinion. I think this is what happened at that time. So, but you need to be very patient. It takes a lot of time. Yeah.
It's just that our people don't like the subject of history. It's boring.
It is. But there's a price to pay. Reading and reading and reading but at the end of the day, you may find something important in the document that was missing, or it changes the storyline. Just that one paragraph or that one sentence or the date or the name of the person can change things.
Exactly.
Oh, we thought it was this, but it's not. It's actually this, which is what happened with the Sulu case over Sabah. We suddenly discovered, now we know why they had to sign the agreement to give up any claims over Sabah in January 1878. It just took one book and 2 pages, particular pages from a particular journal, and we had a lot of answers there already, which, sometimes it's the reading, it's very long, it's very tedious, it can be boring, as you say, but you have to do it if you really, really want to get to the gist of it, huh? So, yeah.
Again, to wrap this thing up, I would say thanks to Chris, who actually enlightened us in the sense like the rise of Raja Muda Hashim versus against the fall of Marudu. We also want to thank Avtar Singh for his generous and quite interesting comment. And again, our local historian here, who have a lot of interesting doubt and questions, of which is not the end of it. We will continue about all this interesting topic. Again, Chris, you want to say anything before we close this chapter today?
You're a visitor to Sabah, Chris.
Yeah. So we give you the last.
It has been, well, we didn't quite, well, we kind of explained, right?
Yeah.
I was interested in seeing where the fort might actually be, because it seems a bit strange to me. It's something that is so prominent in Sabah history and so obviously important to Sabahans themselves, that the fort is just not marked or known. It seems a bit odd. I don't know if it's a Western thing. We like to go find things and look at things.
I'm definitely disappointed. I cannot find the signboard even. We turned there two, 3 times today to look for the signboard of port of Sharif Osman. We cannot
But
find it.
yeah, but we did find something that looks like a good possibility that could be the site. But you can't just say, I think it's the site, just because it does match a lot of the requirements.
Your drone helps a lot.
Yeah, and you can see from above.
And the maps.
If I had
the maps.
if I had a submarine, I use a submarine.
We need
But-
we need Chris to come to visit Sabah more often.
Agree.
But-
and give his opinion and try to direct our historian toward the right way of looking into history, and probably encourage a lot of our Sabahan to love our local history and appreciate, not just love, but appreciate our local history, even to the extent probably request the government to gazette some of the historical site to become, heritage site.
It'd be interesting if they rebuilt one of the forts at least
That's one
at
of my wish.
Marudu. Can be done.
Well, there were talks about it.
Anyways, Encik Roslan, terima kasih. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another extremely interesting day of What's the Story of Our History.